IVM.
At Simplified, we love discussing hypothetical scenarios for the future, like what the post-COVID world would be like, or if machines could take over the world the way Skynet does in Terminator. Well, the latter can be avoided if we empower our youth and everyone else with the knowledge of AI and how it can be used to make our lives easier and better, just without any of that taking over the world stuff. Luckily, though, Intel's Digital Readiness program empowers everyone with the skill sets, mindsets, and tool sets to use in an AI fueled world. The Intel AI for Youth program is an initiative that guides today's youth to an understanding of AI, how it's designed, and why it's important today. Intel's been working with the CBSE, the Ministry of Education, and the Government of India to empower today's youth to build social impact solutions while demystifying what AI is. So, how do you take advantage of this? Purchase an Intel Core powered PC and you get free access to 80 plus hours of immersive and hands-on training about AI. On completion of the program, along with a certificate, you get access to AI toolsets to try to put to use what you've learned. So don't wait. Log on to futurebanawonderful.intel.com. Future Banaw Wonderful by bringing home an Intel powered PC. Hello and welcome to Simblified. We are recording today on a very august occasion of the last international episode for Simplified, owing to the fact that I am doing my version of Ghar Wapsi. And there is, so it's going to be the last time I record with a 2.5 hour time difference, which will be a delight for a lot of my other hosts, especially our producers who have to wake up at 7 a.m. to start this nonsense on Saturday mornings. So that's where. So today we are going to have an interesting topic linked to this Ghar Wapsi, a topic called the Great Resignation. But before we get into what that Great Resignation is, let's go around the room and ask our other podcast hosts what is their most interesting resignation story. So anyway,
I like how you say this as if we've all resigned from about 15 jobs.
I mean, that has to have happened. I mean, your only resignation story or the most interesting one? You pick the best one. So all right. So Chuck, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I resigned on fairly decent terms with my last company to become a freelancer. So I guess that's one. But technically, there is one company that I worked for a very short period of time, which I have even excluded from my CV for purposes that shall be discussed over beer with anyone who is interested. And there I was kind of pseudo fired.
Oh, wow.
So let's not get too much into detail, but that was interesting and relieving also at the same time. I mean, relieving in many ways. I remember the interesting thing about that was I was fired while I was on my notice period. So I already handed in my papers. And I was already going to move out. So it is sort of like we've realized we don't need you anymore.
You can't quit, we fire you.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah.
that's kind of counterproductive, right? But anyway, yeah. So
that is fun.
Yeah. So Tony?
Actually, I've left only one job, which is to do an MBA. But to be honest, I guess if you're not really into coding or software engineering, it's relieving for both sides, right? So
exit zero.
Exit zero. Yeah, it was quite expected only. So
how long was your notice period?
It was 1 month, I guess. Yeah. But basically it was a standard sort of MBA resignation, nothing too dramatic about it, I guess. Yeah. I'm not part of the Lance revolution, as it were.
Lance revolution.
So maybe we're quitting it to freelance.
Even better.
I remember when I handed in my papers at the software engineer. I mean, like all the good South Indian boys, I worked in a software company too at one point of time. I remember when I handed in my papers, I expected a whole bunch of questions from HR, like, why are you leaving? Do you want to say a career prospect? What the question that I did not expect was, how did you get through? I'm also planning to the same school that you're going to.
Yeah, I think engineers quitting to do MBA.
Yeah.
Like engineers quitting software jobs to do MBA. That must be like the most common template of resignation ever.
Yeah. That's a rite of passage.
I must be one of the very, very few who quit an MBA job to go back
to do engineering.
Oh man, yeah.
And that too, you're so hipster that you didn't go to software engineering. You went to actual engineering, as in like the lathe and machines.
I remember my boss was the MD of the company, and he was a very kindly person. And so I was working in that company for about 3 years, and so we became good, sort of an avuncular relationship. And when I told him, he says, "What?" And then I told him what I was planning to do, and he asked me, "Are you out of your mind?" So I told him, I'm not sure, but probably not. So he told me in true Wodehousian style, "In that case, all the best."
Naren,
cool.
because I don't know this part of your this dark past of dark period in your history. What were you actually doing?
So I was working for it was a Tata company, and I was taken up fresh out of MBA. I had, like all MBAs, really nothing to do because company was making money. You just hung around in office, discussed shares, read the papers, had tea, and met solicitors once in a while. So it was like any other MBA job. Nothing, no deliverables, nothing. And for 3 years, it was jolly good fun. I mean, you go wherever you go, you stay in like a Taj, and then you lord it around. And it was at the end of 3 years, I was going nuts.
Mm-hmm.
There was literally nothing.
It speaks a lot about you that this is the life that disagreed with you. It speaks a lot about you.
It does. I am cursed with sort of fidgetiness. I cannot just sit idle without nothing.
Fair enough. Most people would buy a fidget spinner for that. You just chose to go and start a factory. Fair enough.
To create fidget spinners.
Amazing.
But I feel, Srikeit, all of these questions are leading up to something. So do you have news for us?
Yes. Yes. And first I can share my resignation stories. The two resignations, most recent resignations were two polar opposites. My current resignation included probably the longest notice period I have ever known, or I think anyone has ever known, of 3 months. And so 3-month notice period, and versus the job before that, which was about 8.5 years ago, which I quit. I had a notice period of 1 day. So yeah, because there was a real. So what happened was we had there was a huge management change in that company, and they really wanted to change and switch out everyone who was hired by the previous management.
Fair, okay.
So while they were systematically firing different departments, they hadn't arrived at mine yet. And before that, I got a job at another agency, which I took up. And when I went to give my resignation, they were very thrilled because everyone else, when they were firing, they were giving 2 months of salary. Versus for me, because I was quitting, they didn't need to give me a severance package at all. But they were more than happy to give me a 1-day notice period and like give me a nice recommendation letter also to boot.
So, he quits very well.
He quits well. So yeah, that's my resignation story, and all of this again is from the outlook, which is personally relevant and is also a greater macro trend, which we discussed on the episode today. Is that I have resigned my job, and with the resignation, I also unlike a lot of other resignations, I resigned this job with no, so to speak, future prospects. So I am officially and into the distant future, I am unemployed.
Yeah, which is why now the Srikeit life of Srikeit.in is also now going to have sort of like a buy me a coffee logo integration within this.
Milo.
Milo.
Yeah,
oh yeah, definitely Milo. But yeah, so on that, I mean, not wanting to get into my personal reasons of resignation, which do resonate with that larger topic, but there is also a larger trend called the Great Resignation that's going on. Now, the data on this is sadly still quite US centric, but the phenomenon is global and is mainly US centric, and you can't get India data because the Indian government does not release data on unemployment, as Ravish Kumar might have told you.
But along with a few other things as well, but sure, we'll go with resignation for now.
Yes, but the key statistic is that over the months of April, May, and June in 2021, over 11.5 million workers in the US quit their jobs, and that's like that's the among the highest resignation rates ever noted in the US labor market. And so, yeah, I mean, while these resignations happened across industries, so this is happening in the frontline worker service industries, as well as when you talk about tech industries, as well as communications, advertising. So across the board, these resignations were happening. And so there is a certain professor, Dr. Anthony C. Klotz, who's the associate professor at Mays Business School of Texas A&M University, who actually coined this term called the Great Resignation. And he pointed out that this is a trend that is obviously exacerbated, and a key contributor to this is the pandemic. But the reasons are multifold, and that's how we can kind of like look into each of these reasons. One and the most obvious and most basic reason why the resignations peaked during this year is because over the last year, I mean, there's a normal turnover, there's a normal churn, right? People want to resign at all points in time. But because of the pandemic happening last year, there were surprisingly very few people who resigned, because everyone was like, this pandemic has taken us by surprise, and a lot of people wanted to stick on to their jobs. So, but there are a lot of people had solid reasons to quit their jobs. And as the economy in the US started opening up specifically, and even around the world, where people started experiencing that, okay, eventually I do want to resign. I can put it off for a while, but I'm not going to do that. So the backlog of resignations first came to peak. So that's the first reason of this Great Resignation. The second reason, which is actually really important and correlated to this, is that there have been supremely heightened levels of burnout. And they also when they did the research, they found that this burnout was actually seen lesser among Gen X and baby boomers, but it was seen specifically heightened in the Gen Z and millennials. So they were the guys who were saying that they are experiencing heightened levels of burnout because of the process of working from remotely. A lot of people not used to that. Also, the demands of working along with all the demands of like home, that people responsibilities around the house with children, pets, etc., all of that stuff. The third reason, the first and second reason are somewhat understandable, but what are the most interesting and where we can have a discussion is the third and the fourth reasons. The third reason was, especially since April, May, and June in the US, and as we are going to be experiencing now in India as well, is that workplaces started opening up, and a lot of employers started calling their employees back to work. And a whole bunch of employees, it's almost like the pandemic was like, it forced people into the house, and now people don't want to leave, because they're like, I have understood that there is no reason for me to turn up at my workplace anymore. And so there is a whole bunch of people who firstly don't want to go back to work altogether. They want to work remotely because they're able to handle their home life as well as their free time in a better way remotely. And the second part is that a lot of them are also continuing to have scares and fears of the pandemic, which is continuing, right? So a lot of employers are mandating people to come back. And this is, in the US, it's amusingly polarizing, because there are people who are resigning because their offices don't have vaccine mandates. And there are people who are resigning whose offices are having vaccine mandates. So there's people on both ends of the spectrum who are resigning, and employers are basically damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And so the remote work comfort has become a major factor for a lot of people doing this. And finally, which is the most interesting and varied and wide-ranging reason, is what Professor Klost called Professor Klotz, sorry, my bad. Klotz called pandemic epiphanies, right? That over this period of time, people have been stuck at home, and this has been a great time for people to reevaluate their lives, right? Reevaluate what their priorities are, reevaluate what money means in their life, reevaluate what a work-life balance is like. And a whole bunch of people are actually making different kinds of shifts. Some are quitting for better opportunities, better pay, better benefits from their workplace. Some are quitting because they are finding they want to switch careers altogether. Some are quitting just so that they can take some time and rest and reevaluate and recover from the burnout that they suffered. So there are multiple.
And also,
reasons.
I think the emancipation from that imperative to wear clothing on the lower half of your body.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I mean, the need for all these rules and regulations that are effectively carried over from the industrial era, like, right? Like you have this specific number of hours. You're supposed to sit in a specific place, wear a specific clothing, and constantly work on an assembly line effectively, right? All of those taboos were finally broken with the fact that you no longer need to turn up at your workplace. So in that, so these were the 4 reasons, and let's examine these 4 reasons in detail, and we'll take a quick break and come back and have a greater discussion on the reasons as well as our opinions on what's causing this particular phenomenon. See you on the other side.
Intel vPro provides the complete manageability tools to detect, repair, and protect your devices remotely so your workforce can keep doing what they do best, wherever they are working from. Today, as most employees and IT teams no longer work under the same roof, fixing glitchy PCs and proactively managing the PC fleet has become increasingly difficult. The Intel vPro platform addresses these problems. With its Intel Active Management technology, vPro enables IT to keep mission-critical resources running by establishing a secure connection between IT and an Intel vPro platform-based PC. In the event of a cyber attack, Intel AMT lets IT remotely manage and repair systems simultaneously, even if they are dispersed across multiple locations. PCs can be recovered quickly wherever they may be. Plus, the Intel Endpoint Management Assistant enables cloud-based manageability using simple web-based tools to connect with and remediate any Intel vPro platform-based PC. Both these tools provide better manageability and faster response time, resulting in substantial device management support, cost savings, and fewer help desk tickets, which is always a good thing. So visit intel.in/IT heroes to know more. Intel vPro, built for business.
Welcome back. And before the break, Srikeit was talking about pandemic epiphanies and other tales that lead us to the mass resignation, which is the next geological era after the heliocentric era, the Great Depression, not the Great Depression, the Great Extinction, and now we have the Great Resignation.
Yes, excellent. Just the same scale, pretty much. Especially
Seismic
for
shift.
employers.
Seismic shift.
Seismic, very, very.
So Srikeit, I think I'm not sure about the data, but I read somewhere that a lot of the employees who quit are actually the ones who had joined new companies during the pandemic, right? So
that's true actually. So there's multiple pointers. So there's a lot of people who definitely there is the turnover and the churn rate of employees who joined during the pandemic is a lot higher. And there are multiple reasons for that. I mean, some of them definitely being the burnout stuff and the burnout, but mainly, especially, I mean, I can speak of from personal experience of the communications industries that, I mean, advertising isn't, while it can, the bones of the company or the industry can work very well remotely. Like you can do all the jobs on paper, but a lot of advertising happens because of like in-person conversations, jams, an office environment. And I mean, advertising employees aren't the best paid in the world. So for the amount that you get paid without any office environment and just having work calls throughout and just being loaded with work all the time has contributed to a lot of burnout, a lot of disillusionment. And so there has been a large amount of churn among people who have joined during the pandemic.
Yeah. And also like ultimately, collaboration needs myths, right? And they're best established when you're sort of directly into
yeah.
the company culture in a physical location.
Absolutely.
As someone who joined a new job during the pandemic, I know it was like really, really hard to just get a feel of the culture of the new workplace, right? And sort of make friendships, as it were, remotely is next to impossible.
Yeah, so you're less connected emotionally to the place. So
Absolutely.
hence the Lego-ness of the whole thing. If I may.
And
you
that's
may
why
be
it's
more
always
productive, but like in terms of sheer like ability to form new collaborations or friendships, it's very, very difficult to do that remotely.
Yeah.
So to my mind, it's a very different comparison frame, right? You were in a different sort of work environment pre-pandemic, and then you thrown into a completely new one, and it's only natural that people feel like this is not what I signed up for and leave also.
Yeah.
and also this also raises a larger point about how it's almost like it's you can almost frame it as the importance of small talk, like about how those fortuitous conversations that you had, the corridor conversations that you had, the conversation you had with a colleague over lunch, and how that translates into your relationship with your colleagues as well as sometimes even work. Like you might be having a unrelated conversation and that sparks something and you end up collaborating on that. And also coupled with that, another factor which is all about how you have there is an environment of so when you're interacting online, right, you choose to log in from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on a call, right? But at no point when you're working entirely remotely, there is no situation you will end up in. You will always enter every situation willingly. And when you're always choosing all your situations, the interactions you will have will be pretty much exactly as you expect them to be. There are no fortuitous experiences that you may have. You may not end up like having a lift ride with someone who you didn't expect, or meeting some other person over lunch, or seeing something while you're down in the cafeteria between how a mom is feeding her child and get an idea and a thought about that. So the restriction of all these like fortuitous experiences has tremendously impacted the overall work experience.
Yeah, I feel like this is a natural extension of our hero, Yuval Noah Harari's talk about gossip and all that. This feels like the natural extension where all these frivolous things are actually the thing that acts as connective tissue to some sense. Some sense.
Even simple things like if you were in a meeting in a physical place and there was some IT related issue, which always happens, you sort of bond over that IT issue and start making fun of IT, right? Now, if you face an IT issue, it's on your side. You're frantically trying to, figure out what's wrong with your Wi-Fi connection. Should I go sit in a different place? Are people judging me because I'm not able to join or I'm not clear, etc.? So it's turned from an area of bonding to an area of sort of
Chuck, if you remember Juby the legend.
I do. Let's not take names or departments.
But we used to. I mean, that is very true, because just common gripes of some sort. Like yesterday when I was at that farewell and I saw a whole bunch of colleagues probably after a year and a half. And while we were talking, we were all like, oh, okay, these quirks about office, like how that person laughs really loudly. And when we are doing a call, it was always distracting and all that stuff. And how you end up meeting people, and which was also a big thing. Like I knew a whole bunch of people because my first year working over here was in person. I knew a lot of people who I never had to work with, but they used to sit around. So I knew them. But now, just there is another person who joined over the pandemic. She didn't work with on any of the accounts that I did. I didn't even know who she was because we had no reason to even like know each other. And so we ended up like meeting there, and I was like, "Hi, I have no idea who you are." And then she's like, "Okay, hi."
Yeah, for all you know, new etiquette might evolve around this. For all you know, but well, let's hope that
we spoke about this during the metaverse discussion as well, right? In terms of how to engineer virtual water cooler conversations. That's the
actually. I've observed among the younger generation, at least.
Please clarify what you mean by younger generation. I'm 37, and I guess I fall under what.
Yeah, so I'm my children, so early 20s, mid 20s, and they are very, very comfortable with an online existence, which is completely different from their offline one.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have, entire conversations. For example, gaming. They have gaming friends, and they talk during when they're gaming, this, that, and the other. I wouldn't be able to imagine when I was younger, gaming meant being on the field somewhere, and it's no longer the case now. So maybe the human propensity or the human sort of requirement to be gossiping all the time does not require physical presence. I would always imagine that we also convey a lot of things to each other by non-verbal communication. The way
Sure.
you look, the way you talk, the way you laugh. Also, it's a ha-ha, but is it really a ha? Is it sardonic? Is it really abuse what it is? So maybe the human nature is able to take that transformation a much sort of far more easily than we imagine.
Yeah.
Is what I think.
You think another reason, Srikeit, for this mass resignation is just that, especially, and I know this is obviously for people who are in a certain profession and have a certain level of privilege, it's just that the opportunities have opened up so much more. I'm talking about the whole product slash, developer, full stack developer in Bangalore situation right now.
Peak Bengaluru.
Peak Bengaluru. Just yesterday, I saw this beautiful tweeter, and there are some hilarious stories on Twitter right now around all this. One person said that he told his boss that new developer we interviewed doesn't want to interview because of location issues. He said, but I thought he was in Bangalore also. He said, yeah, but he's in HSR layout and he doesn't want to travel all the way to Bellandur. So,
Hey, that's a real problem. Okay, I've lived in Bangalore and I know HSR layout to Bellandur. You might as well go to the airport and fly to Bombay. But yeah, no. But the thing is, you're right, because the phrase that he meant that Dr. Klotz talked about, which was all about pandemic epiphanies, is the realization that so from my perspective, one of the key, and this is also linked to the freelance revolution to some extent, where the realization that here I am, because when you're especially working from home, because you're trying to chart out and map out how many hours you're spending at work versus what time you're spending, when you're clocking off from home, you become even more aware of the number of actual hours you're actually putting on to work. And that's where I realized that I'm putting close to 50, 60 hours of work a week, and I'm getting paid X amount of money, versus if I was to work freelance, I may be truly able to switch to a 4 or even a 3-day work week and actually have that much more time to pursue my own interests, also understand what it is. And the other aspect is, because the bigger factor which I feel which has played a big difference is having cut out an entire life outside. You actually realize from your rent what is the minimum amount you need to actually live, right? Because you're no longer doing your commute. What you also realize, what I've also realized is, there is this whole ecosystem of spending money that work itself creates, right? The clothes that you buy, the commute that you take, the food that you end up eating outside because of work and stuff like that, the kinds of stuff that you buy for the convenience for your work and stuff like that. So,
and the worst would be having to go out and spend on a dinner or drinks with colleagues who you really don't want to in the first place. You really
don't want to do, exactly. And the number of the number of end of day work drinks that you end up having with your colleagues. So you end up spending a large portion of the money that you're making on supporting your work habit
itself.
So to speak,
work habit. Interesting.
So if you look at it that way, people have gotten a lot of realization about not just the specifics of the money that is required to survive, but also the meaning of why they are doing this job. So if a job actually doesn't satisfy you or challenge you or satisfy you on an emotional, mental level, is this really worth it? Can I survive without it? And maybe I get valued somewhere else better. And these are the questions that have gotten really have come out in a big way for a lot of people.
And I obviously will back up that observation of yours of a freelance revolution, purely because, one, I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years, but also I've been seeing on the demand side of things more companies are willing to hire short-term talent, especially younger companies. In India, for example, especially these young D2C guys, they're no longer say, we need a full-time employee for this. They're okay saying, hey, we need somebody for a period of 2 months to help us with this. And once the process and all that is set, then we'll get stuff taken care of internally. So there is more, as more demand happens, obviously supply will come to fill that. You'll see more and more people going on Twitter and saying, hey, okay, if there is so much demand for something like this, I guess I can actually take a punt and quit my full-time job and get into freelance or something. And yeah, there is contract opportunity work opening up everywhere else, right? It's not just in India. I'm guessing tech guys, for instance, have opportunities from all over the world, paying US salaries or rates sitting out of HSR layout or Belandur or anywhere else for that matter. So yeah, all these together.
And interestingly, apparently the highest rate of resignation is between the age of 30 to 45, right? Not younger.
That I did not know that.
Yeah. So which also makes a lot of sense, right? Because currently, like, employers probably want to hire people with a certain amount of experience, and these guys are also at a point where they're evaluating everything about their life. Have a midlife crisis. Some people start a podcast, some people choose to quit. So
I feel all of these are targeted towards me, but okay.
No.
No, but there is, Tony, what you said on that, there is actually a interesting, if you look at it from a smaller market perspective, if you look at Malaysia and Singapore, this market, especially in the service industry, is heavily dependent on expats. So like a lot of expats take up a lot of senior management roles. Now, what's happening is because, again, there are very few incoming expats coming. With this particular thing, especially you're seeing this in Singapore, people are legitimately just quitting for no reason. Some people just want to stay, but they are just threatening to quit and almost getting 100% appraisals because there is no way the company will be able to replace that talent. Right. And so that's where like a lot of people are actually making going with the flow of the Great Resignation without even wanting to resign for any real reasons except for just leverage for getting better salaries.
Yeah, and of course there's another trend where because people are working remotely now and people who are really good are actually balancing two jobs at the same time, or at least I have heard tales of that. Possibly the same job for two different companies competing. That'll be amazing. Just imagine doing a com scan of each other and all you have to do is change the text a little bit. But let's discuss this and a lot more
on the other side of the break.
Let's discuss a little break.
$100. That's all it takes to begin your journey with Bitcoin and Ethereum. No, really. With CoinSwitch, you can start investing in over 100 cryptocurrencies with just 100 rupees. On top of that, there are zero charges for deposits and withdrawals, so you can trade, buy, sell, however and whenever you want. All of this, plus their extremely intuitive interface, makes CoinSwitch the perfect app for beginners in the crypto space. But don't take my word for it. Just download CoinSwitch for free and try it out for yourself. If you'd like more information on cryptocurrencies, tune into a show about crypto with me, Rohan Joshi, my new adventure on IVM Podcasts. CoinSwitch, kuch to badlega.
Welcome back to our Simblified episode on the Great Resignation.
Thankfully, none of the four hosts have quit during the break, which is something, if this were a company, then churn would have happened accidentally.
We have some precedence of that though, so we are not entirely out of the woods. But anyway, so we discussed prior to this break, we were discussing the different reasons employees are quitting. But again, as obviously with this huge exodus of employees, employers are desperately trying to retain them. We explored one reason, which is just throwing more money at them, which actually is quite interesting across different industries. So we discussed how it is in the service industry where people are almost giving that much money. It's also true of it's also true in the frontline service industry, like service workers, like fast food people and fast food workers and stuff like that. In the US especially, there was a Burger King and that was actually putting out an ad for a chef or a kitchen worker, and they normally advertise that job at minimum wage.
Yeah,
and they according to and this was I think in Ohio or somewhere, and then when they put the ad out, they normally would get like 60 to 70 applications on an average. In this particular period, when they put it out, they got zero, not one application at minimum wage. So then afterwards, they like introspected and then they put the same ad out and doubled the wage. And only then did they get like 70, 80 applications.
Yeah, and before you move on, Srikeit, very relevant to that, just a couple of days before we are recording this, New York City passed a huge law that gave gig workers, especially delivery workers, a lot of rights, including minimum wage, healthcare, and things like that. So the tide is turning not just from an individual company point of view, but I guess society at large is also realizing, hey, like we can't go on treating frontline workers or delivery workers like this, and it's reflecting in policy making as well. Although this is the same country that did the Texas abortion ban, so keep so a little perspective needed in my
for that. I mean, to be honest, when you look, effectively California and New York are effectively different countries from places like Texas and Georgia. So you can't even. I mean, I don't think
support the sexy movement.
Yeah, it's. I think the biggest ironic statement is the United States of America. But anyway, so this. So yeah, as you
what
said,
are companies doing?
Yeah. So what companies are doing, and the first is that giving more money, allowing for like people to get like their money and benefits in a different way. And the second one is there are different types of benefits people are giving. So what a lot of employers have realized that, okay, if I'm competing, now they are no longer competing against like another company that's just giving more money or whatever. They are competing against a freelance life. They're competing against a life where people are able to get a better work-life balance. So companies like Reddit recently, the most famous is Spotify completely declared that every job that they release is fully remote friendly. So anyone from anywhere around the world can apply for that job. They also Reddit just recently got a new employee policy, which was about giving pet time off. So if you get a new pet, you can get some time off to bond with that pet and stuff.
Amazing.
So that's Reddit just did that. A whole bunch of companies have started giving extended paternity leaves to a lot of their employees, where I think this was it Amazon or someone else?
For employees who are extending their paternity.
Yeah, so you can actually that also. So there was this post by I was seeing on LinkedIn. There was this post by an employee who was talking about how he spent some time bonding with his newborn daughter and taking care and helping the mother and stuff like that. He was given like 2 months of paternity leave, which is unprecedented effectively. And finally, also, which is also really cool, and shout out to my own company, which is one of the first advertising agencies in the whole region that has given mental health support. So actually allowing employees to go visit, covering employees' costs for the first couple of visits to their mental health provider.
This is actually very nascent. Like a lot of companies are only now beginning to recognize that there is such a thing as mental health. So, you just, it's debilitating for some people, and it's good that this has been recognized and taken forward.
So that's where, it's like you said, Naren, it's extremely nascent. Most companies don't recognize it. In fact, it's a paradox. I was just going through my employee, my contract when I was packing everything up right now, and I noted that in the medical benefits I had, it was very clearly said mental health not covered, right? And it was like mentioned in my thing. And from when I started to when I'm now, my office explicitly provides mental health support. And so there has been a big evolution in that time, and there's a recognition because now, especially, I don't think with the pandemic, I think mental health issues or mental health problems and any kind of disorders have actually become more prevalent in the population than ever before in human history. It no longer is a taboo thing that one person in a corner is suffering anymore. It's half your workforce or even more sometimes.
So I just want to add on to that because it's very interesting. So there are obviously companies that are struggling to adapt to this whole thing and trying to stick with the old way of working. It's just now that Zoom is going to replace meetings. Right. And then there are companies who are so super optimized for the new style of working, recognizing the problems that could come in and the things that all of us are talking about, like how do you bond a team over? So just 2-3 days back, I came across a lovely Twitter thread. I won't go through the whole thing because it's pretty long, but a person basically said how they actually built a 60+ person team while driving about $30 million in annual revenue. And they gave like 8 very specific, and it wasn't like general random faff, like be empathetic to everyone and all that, very specific ideas. So one, they created a private team podcast, right? Everybody has to talk about something about themselves that gets shared. Then they have a culture of asynchronous communication, which I think is really good. They have a couple of no meeting days.
Asynchronous communication is just emails.
Emails. It is. But it is. But the expectation that you don't have meetings and stuff like that. No, so
this could just have been an email.
It could have been an email. Then you start by what did you get into this weekend? All sorts of things. So I think once you build for that, I mean, those are some specific examples. But once you build for these things.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please go through the others. I'm actually.
I didn't know that. The others. No, others are almost things like this. You have a specific email sequence, synchronous again, for new team members. You have in order to get those water cooler conversations, as it were, they try to force that a little bit by having unsolicited feedback sessions. Where one team has to comment on something that another team has done. The whole bunch of things like this, whole bunch of small tactical things like this, which works for that company. But I have heard of other kind of examples like this. So it's not just the matter of, hosting one random, very forced breakout session once every Thursday or Friday or something. It's something slightly more empathetic, slightly more effective in some ways.
Yeah, and like you said, Chuck, the progressive companies, and I was reading another example of a tech company that's actually using tech to mitigate this process. Like for one thing that they did was they had this automatic on their Slack channel. They have had like these automations that kind of push out something that share a picture from your weekend. Right. So it automatically goes out to all the employees, and then there is a conversation generated based on that. So then there's an environment of you're sharing something that you did over the weekend that was fun for you and all that stuff. And so they've kind of like created a whole bunch of Slack automations to kind of replicate that workplace environment and the camaraderie to some extent. And so, there are a lot of companies that are doing shit like that.
Yeah. Have you heard of a company called Gitlab? Gitlab?
Yeah.
By any chance?
I think it's Gitlab.
Anyway. Yeah, Gitlab. Sorry. So Gitlab is a tech company that I think is a competitor with what's the company that Microsoft acquired? GitHub. GitHub. So I think it's a competitor like that. But what it does is not important. Since 2015 or 16, they have been completely remote in the sense they never ever had an office. Right. So they in fact have treated that as a USP, the fact that they're able to hire great talent from around the world because of this remote model. And obviously, their entire workflow and everything was optimized for remote, which placed them extraordinarily well at the beginning of the pandemic. They're about to go public right now, if I remember. And interestingly, they even created, they've become sort of like quote unquote thought leaders for the remote working space revolution. So they've created a huge guide for, hey, a lot of you guys are going to work remotely for the first time. Here's what's worked for us. And I remember reading somewhere, I don't know how true this is, that they're actually doing consultancy for other companies in terms of how to transition remotely. Wow. Just imagine that, like what a cool revenue stream that is.
Yeah. No, and it is even with when it comes to some advertising agencies like the one that I have recently left. There was this there is this endeavor. It's still not fully operational and still not fully effective, but they have this endeavor of actually seeing how they have a directory of all the jobs that are there open around the world in the agency network, and that they are actually open to internal audiences to apply. Cool. And there is an actual like process with which you can apply to those jobs. And correspondingly, and that is the other factor which companies are trying to do along with the benefits is training. So there are with the factor of with the problem that a lot of employees are looking at. I don't know what I want to do in the long term. Maybe I want to switch careers. Maybe I want to switch industries. Companies are, especially larger companies, are actually willing to train their employees towards their new careers as long as they stay within the ecosystem. And then they have that thing that, okay, you can transition to another role and another vertical and another department altogether inside that. So there are a lot of companies that are trying to offer more and more training to do that.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a major factor. But finally, the most important one, which I think is critical to change the way we work, is that companies are finally learning to adapt to the whole flexi working environment. Right. So now you no longer. So one thing is, when companies are going back, they're trying to figure out, and this is the most difficult thing, to be honest, because I've worked in the similar situation where the Singapore office is actually back to office.
Okay.
Malaysia isn't back to office, and obviously Singapore and Malaysia are two different countries, so we never can have a meeting in the same meeting room. But trying to figure out how do you do a hybrid meeting where there are certain employees who are all at one location and certain who are joining remotely. So you have like the classical problems of passing around the mic.
Yeah.
The laptop, which is the mic, has to be passed around so that every person who's speaking gets heard. The banter gets missed, and you often notice that like someone's talking, there's some in-between conversation, and the people are not able to listen because the mic is not near them.
Yeah.
So there are some real, I mean, there is a real need for technological solutions that can allow for people who are physically present in the same location as well as people who are joining remotely to feel on an equal footing as far as their ability to participate in a meeting, coupled with also the flexi work timing. So a lot of companies are realizing that, we don't need employees. If we are able to get work done, we don't need employees to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, right? We just need them to maybe work. We can afford to have them take a day off in the middle. We can afford to give a lot more time off to employees. And other factor also is that we don't even need them to clock in 9 to 5. They can choose to work at any point in time. So I got a sense of this when I was doing a lunch club conversation with someone from Toronto, and they were talking about how in their company there are a whole bunch of young parents, so young dads and young moms. So they have specific breaks on calendars which are feeding breaks with their children, feeding and playing breaks with their children, and they have and those are blackout hours for clients as well as internal people. And they have divided their organization into shifts. There's the dad shift and the mom shift. So
this is just Canada showing off now.
Yeah. So the dad shift is like, the dad shifts are towards the evenings and the mom shifts are towards the afternoons or the mornings. And so the dad shift is working when the mom shift is off, and vice versa.
Very cool.
So they actually have like systems that they're building out like that. So I think it's a really exciting time if you look at it from an employee and workforce point of view, because there's so much innovation coming in, and employers are now forced to innovate to retain talent, and it has truly become an employee's market.
Yeah.
It's a talents market. Like, you have the choice of company that you want to go to and where you decide to take your talents to.
Yeah, 100%. On that note,
one very important contribution I wanted to make regarding feeding children. So when my kids were very young, so I was working. My wife Sheila was a homemaker, so afternoon was fine. I mean, she used to. So when I came back in the evening, the feeding the kids at night was my job. If the food was not interesting, if the food was interesting, she would feed them. So I had to devise ways of. Her logic was that I'm doing the afternoon feeding as well. So I had to devise ways of innovative ways of feeding. Where kids are very difficult to feed if the food is not interesting. And people who have kids, I'm sure Tony is going to be able to relate to this very well. So I just remembered I used to take this a little bit of food on the spoon, and the spoon would be a space shuttle or something, and it would go around orbit half the room and all, and then it would go and land in their mouth. And they used to love that. So
that was amazing, because Naren, it just makes me sad to hear that story, because while the world of mechanical engineer might have gained a great mind, the world of advertising has lost a great mind, because that's exactly what we do. We make uninteresting products.
Let me cut you right
kind
there,
of like
Chuck.
sexy
I think
over
the world of advertising has not lost anything ever. It has only taken.
Fair enough.
Chuck, were you saying that the world of advertising just spoon feeds clients in
nicely done. But I was, Srikeit, when you were saying that, I was thinking of something. So we all think that like there's so much change that's happening around right now. I was just thinking even like B-school education and all that is happening remotely right now. And they must be learning so much itself, right? Because there's so much change happening in such a short period of time. I guess in some sense, the guys who are experiencing the most amount of change while they're studying are actually students who are studying HR to some extent.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Hopefully.
things are changed. Yeah.
Burn all the
Yeah.
textbooks.
More importantly, I hope that results in fewer Rangoli competitions and more employee-centric campaigns.
Wonderful. That's a great note to sort of wind things up on. Here's to less Rangoli competitions and more employee-centric, whatever you said on your finishing slide.
Slide.
Oh my God. You can take a man out of advertising.
Yeah.
Naren, bring up the thank you slide.
Yeah. So thanks everyone, and stay safe, stay remote, and stay simplified.
Wow.
Wow. Excellent. Bye. See you
Be quick.
Bye.
Wow.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus is joined by two youth leaders from the United Nations We the Change campaign, Akhilesh Anil Kumar and Garvita Gulhati. They talk about why plastic and water are the major issues that need attention immediately. On the Wire Talks, author and journalist Pallavi Iyer tells Siddharth about her latest book, Oriented, an Indian in Japan. On KBCD, we meet entrepreneur Manish Vyas, who talks to Farhad and Sunetra about the world of queer-owned businesses and the challenges they face. On Tede Mere Raste, Keshav takes us to India's biggest man-made lake, Bhopal Tal. And on Yuddha, we discuss how Akbar's fury led to creating a world-changing empire for the Mughals. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our others for that matter, please do tell a friend. We really appreciate you spreading this. Word of mouth helps a lot. And finally, this week, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, and Intel. We really appreciate the support.
Habits? Routines? How exactly do they help us get better? Well, to simplify it for you, tune in to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor, and I'm going to be here to help you get better daily with some simple, easy-to-do habits that you can easily adapt to your life. So tune in to the Habit Coach podcast from Monday to Friday, because I believe that awesome lives start with awesome habits.